Welcome to Long Lost Friends. I'm Elizabeth Eve King.
And I'm Andrea Goyan.
I'm a painter, performer, writer, Pilates teacher, animal lover, and biologist.
No, I'm a painter, performer, writer, Pilates teacher, animal lover, and okay, I'm not a biologist, but we're long lost
friends. Today, we are so excited to be back talking to environmental scientist, educator, author, artist, paleontologist, and all-around adventurer, Dr. Marcus Eriksen. He also might bring out some dinosaur bones to show you. Today, we're going to be talking about integrating art and science with him. He's a writer and an artist, and his books chronicle his adventures in war, as well as down rivers, across oceans, on rafts and boats made of junk. So it's art, it's science, and it's adventure.
Sure.
And we want to also find about things in science that you might want to incorporate in your writing, world building, as well as environmental facts and solutions, because we all know climate fiction is really popular right now, probably because the world is burning outside. So, you know, you need something to read while you're enjoying your apocalypse. So welcome, Marcus, and tell us about art and science, and maybe also a piece of advice you wish you could give your younger self.
Art and science, I mean, as you know, science can live without art, and art can live without science. They're not mutually exclusive. And as a scientist in science, you need to have that creative leap, that inductive reasoning doesn't, that creativity to try to make sense of observations, not to, trying to communicate science, social issues as well. And they're all mixed together. Like my interest on science TV past. Ever show you this soldier I made years ago? So this is one of my first big sculptures was it's the first Iraqi soldier I saw in the first Gulf War as my convoy, to Kuwait City in 1991. I stood up and I said, "Hey, look, a body." It was the first man that we saw, and I started to deal with that variance. So I made this. This is the man that I saw. He had been blown out of a jeep, and he was almost severed in two. And I was able to make his body out of St. Petersburg, Russia. But for me, it was releasing trauma, and it was communicating a relationship between the soldier in war and the perception of who the enemy is. When we saw this man, I guarantee every Marine I was with, we closed our mouths, opened our eyes, and we saw a fellow human being. So art for me has been powerful, not just communicating science, but I think communicating ideas very difficult to express to the public. And art was also, in the sense of releasing trauma, it took all that experience, all that hurt away. And it made the experience a little more, I wouldn't say benign, but less toxic in my head. And I met a lot of veterans that tell their own stories. Other folks have suffered trauma using art to express that. But I want to talk about science, about art and science. I want to show you another exhibit I've worked on. I'm from New Orleans, and when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, hit my brother's house, my mother's house, I made a beeline from California, drove across the country with my van full of tools, and I met them. And I spent a month and a half there just fixing up their homes. And it was interesting, of all the destruction, what I saw being rebuilt first, the first thing to come out of the rubble was two things. One was religious statues. In New Orleans, a lot of people, every block someone has a statue of Jesus or the Virgin Mary or on their front lawn in concrete. Or the American flag. I saw so many American flags coming out after Katrina. So what I saw were these religious statues and these national symbols, as if people were flocking to religion and nationalism for some security. So I made this sculpture. You can see behind me, I'll unravel the flag. This flag I found buried in my brother's backyard. It was under about a foot of mud. We were digging and removing trash. But then the statue behind me, there were so many homes destroyed and their wrought iron fences were just torn apart. I took those pieces of fencing and I made, that's an outline, a silhouette of Mary. As you can see, it's got the corazon and the flag and the silhouette all together. And it's a play on where we look when we're looking for salvation or sustenance. When we look to religion and nationalism, to God and country, instead of looking to the science. So it's making a play on these ideas, while the Hurricane Katrina is extreme weather, and we're linking that, science is more linking that extreme weather events to climate change. So instead of understanding the science and creating policies and trying to change those intangible relationships that happen over decades of time, it's easier to look at God and country for salvation. So that exhibit is one that's communicating that.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. I wrote a story once where a Virgin Mary appears on the wall of a Mexican village, and then she starts getting colors and everybody's worshiping her, though they're feeling ill. And then it turns out that it's a fungus, actually, that, you know, everybody sees what they want to see, so they all die. It's another happy science. But you're right, people do. They look to God or country and it's the wrong direction. That's a very powerful piece.
Maybe it's because it's the simplicity of that kind of understanding. And it's, if you can look to religion, look to country, you can very quickly say, yes, this is going to save me. And it's much more tangible, easy to digest than the complexity of science. No one's going to read abstracts after a natural disaster to understand what happened. Or, you know, they're going to listen to their national leaders or their priest to tell them what to do next.
Yeah, they're searching for solace, and that's where it's easiest to find it.
Yeah, yes. You know, I find, you know, I do a lot of exhibit design as well, and thinking about when you display an object, whether it's a plastic bottle boat or a dinosaur skull, creating an artistic context, I think is sort of, it's essential to explain the things that are missing. Like in paleontology, there's so much missing in the history of life on Earth. You got to create what's gone, and art is a way to do that. You know, that I really dislike when museums recreate a skeleton and so it looks like it's all there. All the bones are perfectly replicated. I want the scientists to leave the skeleton as they found it. Broken bones, bite marks, bones decomposed. And then that prompts the visitor to ask, well, what happened to that skeleton? Then you can talk about scavenging and burial and decomposition and erosion. You lose those stories when you do too much restoration. So I like when you leave things the way they are, so you can allow for that creative interpretation.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And like the scales you're going to put on that of all these different colors, because who knows, maybe they were rainbow dinosaurs.
Yeah, I've been collecting dinosaurs for almost 30 years now, and I have so many broken bits of bones. When I put a skull together, like I got one Triceratops way over there, the missing bits, I want to put little stick. Actually, I've got one to show you, Evie. So this is bottle caps, and I can make this little pyramid-shaped scale. Has all the colors from the old bottle caps.
Oh, wow.
I'll put these all over the dinosaur. And the point is that we don't know what color they were. You know, this is reading the scales. I've actually called a few paleontologists to say, is there any evidence of scales on Triceratops? We have outlines of large scales, therefore the size of this, but the color, totally unknown. I found one duckbill dinosaur about almost 16 years ago, covered with skin impressions. It had long banana-like scales on top of the ridge in the back. It had little, what looked like florets of round that was going down the tail as if they were spotted, but the color totally unknown. It even had the pads of the feet on this dinosaur. It had like little BBs for a textured pad on the foot. So you can take the science, and then there's a lot of interpretation needed to make sense of it. I want to show you one more exhibit, you know, trying to convey to people that, and this is talking about astronomy, that, you know, our life on this planet, it's pretty rare to have this Goldilocks zone where you have a planet that's close enough to a star that water stays in a liquid state long enough for the spark of life to happen and life to begin to flourish. So between the sun and the moon, there's our planet. So I took this old church window. Down low so you can see it. And in this church window, I put the sun above in glass, and the bottom, the moon is rising. Then right in the middle, I took a cladogram, a family tree, and I put on here, maybe you can see, there is over here an ostrich leg cut in cross section. There's a T-Rex pelvis in cross section, a late Cretaceous crocodile in cross section, a woolly mammoth that I cut the femur, a little slice of it, and a human bone. And the relationships are all done in red glass, that family tree. And then of course, in the middle, there's lots of, you know, green and blue to show life is sandwiched between the sun and the moon, this Goldilocks zone that we exist in. And I thought just to use art to explain that rarity and in the universe, those special criteria to allow life to flourish.
That's so cool.
Wow.
And that's so
Great.
Yeah, I mean, and I would think that when you have your exhibits with the kids, that kind of thing really brings it to life. You know.
Yeah, I thought, you know, as an educator and trying to build this series of network of small museums, to not give the visitors everything, give them just what we know in science, what we think that it means. Let them interpret it for themselves, but in a makerspace. You know, if I gave them one bone and say, where do you think this came from? What does it connect to? What color was it? How fast do you think it went? And all these things. And then share, here's how scientists try to figure that out. But go ahead, put it together. Make sense of it. What do you think of our lonely planet in the solar system and how vast the universe is? I'm actually on our new farm. We bought this 15-acre ranch farm about 6 months ago. We're going to put on this farm a 700-foot walking timeline of natural history, where each inch is 500,000 years, to show how vast time is. And up one hill, we're going to have a model solar system. It's about 600 feet. And at that scale, if the sun is at zero and Neptune is at 600 feet, the sun is as big as a tennis ball. And the Earth and Venus are like peppercorns, and they're hundreds of feet apart. You get to realize how vast space is. It's so hard to convey these concepts. You need art. You need that creative loop to make sense of our experience.
That's fabulous. I can't wait to see it when it's not even done, before it's done. But I also think that art and science, you use a lot of the same skills, because you really, if you're going to do good art, I think you have sort of objective, like you're just studying what's there, like whether it's the science or how the light is hitting something to make it, you see what's there and how can I work on that, instead of just, you know, some totally imaginary thing. At least that's what I think. You have to observe in the same way to create both things, you know.
Totally agree.
And you have an idea, or you have a concept in your head, and then you either have to prove it or create it. You know, I mean, I think that's why science and art are so similar to, you know.
Yeah, well, a botanist looking at a flower and an artist painting a flower, I mean, it's that same kind of observation of what's there. It's just, you know, whether you're more interested in the way the anther looks or whether it's a sexual reproduction organ, that's a different, but it's still the same observation, I think.
Oh, that's interesting.
And creating
So,
links between observations. Like I've published research papers on the abundance of plastics in the world's oceans. It's as simple as counting particles. And that kind of descriptive science, it's not that creative. But then in other instances, you take that and you try to say, okay, what does that mean in an economics, sociological context? What does it mean that there are 5.25 trillion particles of plastics in the world's oceans? That's what we published. And what does it mean to global governance? What does it mean to human health? And you got to start making connections between what biologists are observing, the particles that we count, the economics of what you do about it, where it's coming from, all these things to make connections between these. You know, art is really, it facilitates multidisciplinary thinking. In the case of,
exactly.
been my experience with working on plastics, from counting particles in a petri dish to consulting with the UN other scientists on global governance. Art gets you there. Art makes those connections to grow the conversation.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you have any last words for, if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be? Don't grow up. No.
Don't stop collecting things. That's all it's so. That's my greatest joy.
Oh, that's a great piece of advice. Not what I expected exactly. Never stop collecting things. Become a hoarder.
That's as profound as I could be at the moment. I still have my youthful collections. I've got my stamp collection, my coin collection, my leaf collection, my bottle cap collection, my matchbook collection,
You have a
stamp
matchbook?
collection.
Okay. Really?
I did all kinds of stamp matchbooks. It was interesting. It was a weird thing about, and I've thought about the psychology of this, to have sets of things, to have one of each of everything, to have the rarest thing. All these things, these different parameters of collections. Like you think of Beanie Babies and Cabbage Patch Kids, they exploited those natural tendencies to want to have one of each, to have them all, to have the rarest, to have the cleanest, without wrinkles or tags damaged. It's all these weird characteristics of collecting I've thought about. So I would tell myself when I was as a kid, I'd say, keep on collecting. Don't be embarrassed that you got a house full of things that fascinate you. Keep them all.
Cool. That's good. That's why you need to keep buying more museums.
That's why you need a 4,000 square foot barn.
Yes, exactly. So that's great. So I think we're going to wrap this up with the best thing we learned this week. I'm going to give a shout out to a podcast I love. Okay. It's called 50 Animals That Made Us Smarter. And it deals, Patrick Ahey, just in case he listens, and now he knows I'm a fangirl, 50 animals that made us smarter. And what he does is he deals with biomimicry. So ways that animals or their structures are imitated. The cow's stomach sewage system, building bridges based on the way a sponge builds their house or their thing. Oh, also, if you take two sponges and you put them, this is the only animal that can do this, and it just fascinates me. You put them in a blender, they'll reform back into their original thing. So you can grind them up into bits and their cells will reform.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, isn't that cool?
That's bizarre. Well, I'm going to riff off of you because you said one of your favorites. I'm going to talk about one of my favorite nature photographers who's here in LA, Robert Martinez, and he sets up his cameras out in the Angeles Crest Forest, and he gets the most amazing wildlife photography. And this week he posted, well, he posts a lot, but he posted a picture of vulture, turkey vulture, feeding its baby, which you'd love, Elizabeth. And but I mean, the baby looks as big as the parent, but it's like he's got them, their wings are up, and the mother's got, or the father is feet, has its head down into the baby's mouth, and it's amazing. It was very cool.
Oh,
That's really cool.
So,
My observation. So when I bought this farm, I saw a metal bar on the ground, went to pick it up and it wouldn't move. And I realized that it was the top of a tractor. And it took me 6 months to dig about 7 feet down to find the tires. And just last week, I pulled it out of the ground. And in doing so, I found a very large millipede. I've not seen one this size. It looked like one of those fat pencils you had in preschool, about that long. And I was like, wow. So I kept them alive in my house for a few days instead of feeding it apples and bits of potatoes before I let it go. But it was cool. So it was like a new thing on my species list for Southern California was this large. Oh, and I saw a coyote about 10 feet from my front door eating my grapes like 3 days ago.
Oh, that's cool. Wait, but that was a tractor like buried the whole thing, or was it in part, like when you dug it up, is it a full tractor that it's somehow been buried?
how very,
I had to rent a tractor to pull the other tractor out of the ground, and then I got a guy to scrap and salvage the whole thing. What a mess!
how very paleontology-like of you to dig up with a tractor.
Hog heaven digging this thing up.
Hey, wow.
It's
Stop
Well,
digging.
thank you so much.
been so much fun. So
It's been
This has
fun.
been-
really great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll have to have you back when Leap Labs and stuff, you can come back and give us new like updates on it.
Cool.
And what you've dug out of the ground, what other machinery you've dug out of the ground. I want you to find an airplane and dig it out.
I was going to say I found an airplane propeller.
You did?
Yes, I did recently. It's right here's a piece of it. Right there. It's
Wow.
about 4 feet long, but like from a
Okay.
DC-10.
Cool. And I would say you have given new life to hoarders out there. Look, it's like, hey,
Yeah.
don't be ashamed of your hoarding. Look at this guy. He's amazing.
Not it. Just need a big barn to fill it up.
Wow, fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Come visit anytime. Thank you for having me on the show.
Good. I hope you come back.
Yes, yes.
Bye.
Bye.